An entire people vanished from the pages of history. This is the enduring mystery of the lost tribes of Israel, a chosen nation that disappeared without a trace. We are embarking on a quest across continents and through time, from the brutal conquests of the ancient Assyrian Empire to remote communities in Ethiopia, India, and Japan, each holding a piece of this ancient puzzle. By the end, you will understand the most compelling theories behind one of history's greatest disappearances. We will investigate startling claims that connect these tribes to warrior clans in the mountains of Afghanistan and even to the shores of the Americas. So where could an entire civilization have gone? The story of the lost tribes begins not with a disappearance but with a family. Jacob, a patriarch whose name was changed to Israel, had 12 sons. From these 12 men grew the 12 distinct tribes that would form a nation, each one a pillar of a people bound by a shared covenant. For generations, they were united under a single king, from Saul to the wise King Solomon. But this unity would not last. Following Solomon's reign, the kingdom fractured. A bitter dispute over heavy taxes and harsh labor led to a permanent split around 930 BCE. The 10 northern tribes broke away, forming their own independent kingdom of Israel, often called the Northern Kingdom. The remaining 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, stayed loyal to the house of David, forming the smaller southern kingdom of Judah. This division is the very heart of our mystery. The 10 tribes of the north, with their capital in Samaria, would forge their own path, develop their own traditions, and ultimately face a catastrophic fate. It is these 10 tribes, the people of the northern kingdom of Israel, who would vanish from the historical record, becoming the legendary lost tribes. Their southern cousins in Judah, however, would endure, their story continuing through exile and return, eventually giving rise to the Jewish people as we know them today. This single pivotal schism created 2 separate destinies, one that remained visible and one that faded into the mists of time, leaving behind only questions. The stability of the northern kingdom was shattered by the rise of a relentless superpower. The Assyrian Empire, with its highly disciplined army and a reputation for unmatched brutality, began to tighten its grip on the region. For years, the Kingdom of Israel paid tribute to avoid conflict, but when it finally attempted to rebel, the response was swift and catastrophic. Around 722 BCE, the Assyrian war machine, under King Shalmaneser V and later Sargon II, laid siege to the capital city of Samaria. For 3 long years, the city held out, its inhabitants enduring unimaginable hardship, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. Samaria fell. The walls were breached, the royal palace was plundered, and the kingdom of the 10 tribes was extinguished. This was more than just a military defeat, it was a systematic dismantling of a nation. The Assyrians were masters of a terrifyingly effective strategy, not merely to conquer but to erase. They implemented a policy of mass deportation, forcibly uprooting the entire Israelite population from their ancestral homeland. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children were marched across the desert to distant provinces within the vast Assyrian Empire, to places like Gazan and Media. Their homes, their fields, and their very identity were left behind. This forced exile is the very heart of the disappearance. Scattered across a foreign empire, stripped of their land and their central place of worship, these 10 tribes were cut off from their brethren in the southern kingdom of Judah. They were now strangers in a strange land, their community shattered, their distinct culture at risk of being absorbed and forgotten. The Assyrians, in their quest to crush rebellion, did not just defeat an army, they vanished a people. The trail of the 10 tribes grows cold somewhere on those dusty roads leading east into the heart of an empire that no longer exists. But what does it truly mean to be lost? This single word holds a universe of possibilities, each one leading us down a different path in our search. Were these tribes simply absorbed, their identity dissolving like a drop of water in the vast ocean of the Assyrian Empire? Did they intermarry, adopt new gods, and gradually forget the stories of their ancestors until their Israelite heritage was nothing more than a faint, forgotten echo? This is the theory of assimilation, a quiet fading away into history. Or is lost a more literal term? Could entire populations have been marched to such remote, unmapped corners of the ancient world that they were physically severed from all contact, establishing new lives in lands we have yet to discover? Then there is the most tantalizing interpretation of all, the idea that they were never truly lost, only hidden. Did they consciously preserve their traditions in secret, passing down their laws and their lineage from one generation to the next, all while appearing to the outside world as just another culture? This belief forms the core of countless legends, from religious texts that speak of a future ingathering of the exiles, to cultural groups around the world who claim a direct descent from these ancient wanderers. The meaning of lost shifts depending on who is asking the question. For a historian, it is a demographic puzzle. For a theologian, it is a matter of prophetic destiny. And for millions of people today, it is a deeply personal quest for ancestral roots. This ambiguity is what makes the mystery so compelling, and it is the reason we must now journey beyond the ancient Assyrian records to investigate the most extraordinary claims of where these tribes may have gone. While the Assyrians scattered the northern tribes to the winds, not everyone was taken. A small but resilient community remained in the land, and their descendants live there to this day, holding a key to our mystery. The Samaritans are one of the world's oldest and smallest ethno-religious groups, a living bridge to the ancient kingdom of Israel. Their central and unwavering belief is that they are the true descendants of the original Israelites, specifically from the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Levi, who were never exiled. They claim their lineage was never broken, that they are the ones who stayed behind. This assertion places them in direct opposition to the narrative of total disappearance and creates a fascinating historical schism. Their sacred text is not the Hebrew Bible as known in mainstream Judaism, but their own version of the Torah, which they believe is the original and unaltered version. Their holiest site is not the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but Mount Gerizim, overlooking the city of Nablus in the West Bank, a mountain they hold as the one true place chosen by God for worship. This fundamental difference in scripture and holy place was the source of a deep and ancient rivalry. When the Jews, descendants of the southern kingdom of Judah, returned from their own exile in Babylon, they found these northern cousins still living in the land. But instead of a joyous reunion, there was suspicion and conflict. The returning exiles viewed the Samaritans as a mixed people, their faith corrupted by generations of intermarriage with foreign settlers brought in by the Assyrians. They rejected the Samaritan claims and their version of the Torah, refusing to let them help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This rejection solidified a bitter divide that lasted for centuries, a division so stark it is even referenced in famous parables from the New Testament. So, do the Samaritans represent a surviving remnant of the lost tribes, a people who were never truly lost at all? Or are they, as their rivals claimed, a different community altogether, their Israelite heritage diluted and changed beyond recognition? Their very existence challenges the idea of a complete disappearance, forcing us to ask a more difficult question. What if the lost tribes did not vanish into distant lands but remained right where they always were, their identity simply transforming over time into something new, yet still profoundly connected to its ancient roots? This possibility, embodied by the enduring Samaritans, reminds us that the line between lost and found is often a matter of perspective. Far from the ancient lands of Israel in the highlands of Ethiopia, an entire community lived for centuries with a story that seems pulled from legend. They are the Beta Israel, the House of Israel, and their own tradition offers a breathtaking answer to the mystery of the lost tribes. They believe they are the descendants of the tribe of Dan, one of the 10 northern tribes exiled by the Assyrians. Their narrative does not end in the Assyrian Empire, however. It begins with a journey to Egypt, a flight from persecution, and then a great migration south following the Nile into the heart of Africa. There, they established a kingdom, maintaining their distinct Israelite identity in complete isolation from the rest of the Jewish world for more than 2 millennia. The most captivating part of their origin story intertwines with one of history's greatest romances. Some accounts say they traveled with Menelik I, the purported son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. According to this epic tale, Menelik journeyed to Jerusalem to meet his father and returned to Ethiopia with a sacred treasure, the Ark of the Covenant, accompanied by Israelite nobles who would become the ancestors of the Beta Israel. This royal connection places them not as refugees but as guardians of a divine legacy. For centuries, their faith was their fortress. They observed the Sabbath with profound strictness, maintained dietary laws, and celebrated biblical festivals, all while developing their own unique liturgical language and religious texts. They were a living, breathing Israelite kingdom in Africa, completely unaware that their cousins in Judah had survived the Babylonian exile and that Rabbinic Judaism had evolved. The wider world had no idea they existed, and they, in turn, believed they were the last Jews on earth. This profound isolation was finally broken in the modern era, leading to a dramatic and soul-searching debate. Were the Beta Israel truly a lost tribe, or were they a local African people who had adopted Jewish practices? After years of intense scrutiny by Israeli rabbinical authorities, their Jewishness was formally recognized. This monumental decision was based on their unwavering observance of core traditions, proving a continuous, unbroken line of faith stretching back into the mists of time. In the 1980s and 90s, tens of thousands of Beta Israel were airlifted to Israel in daring rescue operations, finally coming home to a land their ancestors had left nearly 3,000 years before. Their incredible journey from a remote African kingdom to the modern state of Israel stands as one of the most powerful and emotional chapters in the entire saga of the lost tribes. They were not just a theory in a book, they were a people waiting to be found. Across the Indian Ocean, another thread of this ancient mystery was quietly woven into the fabric of a new land. Along India's western Konkan coast, a community known as the Beta Israel lived for generations, their very name meaning children of Israel. Their own origin story begins with a shipwreck, a dramatic tale of 7 men and 7 women, survivors from the lost tribes fleeing ancient persecution, whose vessels shattered upon the rocky shores. These 14 souls, they believe, were the founders of their community, the sole remnant of their people to reach this foreign coast. Isolated for centuries, they clung fiercely to the core tenets of their ancestors' faith. They observed the Sabbath with absolute reverence, refusing to light fires or work from Friday sunset until Saturday night. They upheld dietary laws and they celebrated the key festivals of the Jewish calendar, all while their memory of Hebrew and the finer points of rabbinic law faded with the passing generations. To their Hindu and Muslim neighbors, they became known as the Shanwar Teles, the Saturday oil pressers, a name that perfectly captured their 2 most defining characteristics, their sacred day of rest and their traditional profession of cold pressing oil from seeds. This peaceful existence continued until a chance encounter in the 18th century brought them back into the fold of the global Jewish community. A trader from Baghdad, himself a Jew, was astonished to find this large community in India observing the Sabbath and reciting the Shema, the central declaration of Jewish faith. This rediscovery sparked a slow but profound transformation. Teachers arrived from the wider Jewish world, reintroducing Hebrew scripture and rabbinic traditions to the Beta Israel, reconnecting a branch that had been separated from the tree for nearly 2 millennia. Their story does not stand alone in India. Further to the east, in the states of Manipur and Mizoram, another group known as the Bini Manash, the children of Manasseh, tell a different yet equally compelling story of exile. They believe they are descendants of the tribe of Manasseh, one of the lost 10 tribes who wandered through Central Asia before finally settling in the remote hills of northeast India. For centuries, they preserved traditions that bore a striking resemblance to those in the Hebrew Bible, including animal sacrifice and laws of ritual purity, all while practicing an animist faith. In the 20th century, upon encountering the Hebrew Bible, many became convinced that it described their own lost history, leading them to formally return to Judaism. The existence of these distinct communities, separated by vast geography and different historical paths, yet both pointing back to the same ancient source, raises a profound question. How is it that the echoes of a kingdom destroyed in the Middle East 2,700 years ago can be heard so clearly in the villages of India? The answer may lie not in the East, but in a theory that points dramatically to the West, toward an entirely new world. The story of the wandering tribes now leads us into a landscape of towering mountains and fierce independence. Among the rugged peaks of Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pashtun people carry traditions that have sparked one of the most compelling theories in our search. For centuries, their own oral histories and tribal structures have hinted at a possible Israelite origin, suggesting that the exiled tribes did not fade away but became one of the world's great warrior cultures. The clues begin with names. The Yusufzai, one of the most prominent Pashtun tribes, translates literally to sons of Joseph. Other tribal names bear a striking resemblance to biblical figures like the Afridi, which some scholars link to Ephraim, one of the tribes of the house of Joseph. These are not just faint echoes, they are direct claims woven into the very identity of these clans. Beyond names, there are cultural markers that feel pulled from an ancient Israelite past. Pashtun codes of hospitality and asylum are profoundly sacred, reminiscent of customs in the Torah. They maintain strict dietary laws, avoiding the mixing of meat and dairy, and some of their traditional garment designs bear an uncanny similarity to the sacred fringes, the tzitzit, described in the Hebrew Bible. Even physical features, from certain facial structures to the prevalence of the Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic signature common among Jewish priestly lineages, have been noted in studies, adding a biological dimension to the cultural argument. Yet, this theory is far from settled fact. Mainstream historians and geneticists urge caution. They point out that these cultural parallels could be the result of later exposure to Jewish traders traveling the Silk Road rather than evidence of a direct lineage. The genetic evidence remains hotly debated, with many studies suggesting a primarily Central Asian origin for the Pashtun people, their genetic tapestry woven from local threads rather than distant Levantine ones. So, are we witnessing the preserved legacy of the lost tribes, or simply the fascinating way human cultures can develop similar traditions a world apart? The answer may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps a small group of Israelite exiles did find refuge in these mountains, their customs and stories influencing the local population enough to become part of its foundational myth. The true power of the Pashtun connection is not that it provides a definitive answer, but that it demonstrates how the memory of a lost people can endure, transforming over centuries into a powerful and enduring legend. And if these tribes could have traveled as far as the mountains of Central Asia, what was to stop them from journeying even further across an ocean we had not yet named? The journey to find the lost tribes now carries us across the sea to the islands of Japan, where a theory as beautiful as it is controversial awaits. Here, some researchers propose that a branch of the exiled Israelites did not just wander, but sailed, eventually becoming integrated into the very fabric of Japanese society. The focus of this extraordinary claim often falls upon the Hata clan, an influential group that arrived in Japan centuries ago, reportedly from the Asian mainland. Proponents of this theory point to the clan's name itself. Hata, they note, can be written with characters that could be read as Hata, a word strikingly close to Yehuda or Judah. This linguistic echo is just the beginning. They highlight ancient Japanese Shinto rituals that bear a remarkable resemblance to descriptions of worship in the Hebrew Bible. The most compelling parallel is seen in the ceremony of the Japanese high priest. During the most sacred rites, he would be adorned in a pure white robe with fringes at its corners and a distinctive headpiece, an image that to some mirrors exactly the attire of the ancient Israelite high priest. There are even claims about mysterious artifacts, like the mysterious treasure of the Todaiji temple in Nara, which some suggest could be a fragment of a broken Israelite altar. The theory suggests these were not mere coincidences, but the preserved cultural memory of a people who carried their traditions across a continent. Could the Hata clan have been a group of Israelite exiles who brought advanced skills in weaving and civil engineering to ancient Japan, earning them a place of honor in the imperial court? The idea is captivating, painting a picture of a peaceful integration rather than a disappearance. Yet this remains a fringe theory, met with deep skepticism from mainstream historians and linguists. They argue that the linguistic links are tenuous and that the cultural parallels can be explained by independent development or much later cultural exchange along the Silk Road. The white robes of the Shinto priest, for instance, are a near-universal symbol of purity, not unique to Israelite practice. So, are we seeing the ghost of a lost tribe in the rituals of Japan, or are we connecting dots that were never meant to be joined? This theory, for all its intrigue, forces us to confront the power of pattern recognition in our search for the past. We so desperately want the pieces to fit that we can sometimes see a picture that may not be there. Yet the possibility itself is a testament to the enduring mystery, a whisper on the wind that suggests the tribes of Israel may have reached the farthest corners of the ancient world. And if they could reach Japan, what other shores might have felt their footsteps? High in the rugged Caucasus Mountains, another community has preserved its identity against all odds. These are the Mountain Jews, or Juhuro, a people whose history is etched into the steep valleys of Dagestan and Azerbaijan. Their very name, Juhuro, means Jews in their own unique tongue, a language called Juhuri. This is not the Hebrew of ancient scripture, but a living, breathing Persian dialect, richly woven with words from Hebrew, Turkish, and Aramaic. It is the language of their homes and their hearts, a testament to a long and complex journey. How did a Persian-speaking Jewish community come to live in these formidable peaks? The most prominent theory points directly back to the heart of our mystery. After the Assyrian conquest, the story goes, some exiled Israelites did not remain in Mesopotamia. Instead, they began a long migration north and east, eventually finding refuge in the Persian Empire. There, under the rule of the Achaemenid kings centuries later, they were supposedly settled in the empire's volatile frontier regions as a loyal population to guard the mountainous borders. The Caucasus, a natural fortress of stone and ice, became their new home. They built fortified villages known as awls, perched precariously on cliff sides, their stone houses designed for both community and defense. For more than 2,000 years, they cultivated a distinct culture shaped by their environment. They were known as skilled farmers, leather tanners, and weavers, their lives governed by a strict code of honor and hospitality that mirrored the rugged landscape they inhabited. Their Judaism was deeply traditional, yet uniquely their own, blending ancient laws with the practical realities of mountain life. They were so isolated that for centuries the wider Jewish world considered them a legend. Their survival in such a remote and challenging region is a powerful argument for their ancient origins. Could the Juhuro be the direct descendants of those Israelite exiles, a branch of the lost tribes that found not obscurity but a permanent home in the clouds? Their enduring presence offers a compelling vision, not of a people vanishing, but of a people adapting and persevering. carrying the echo of a lost kingdom into one of the world's most unforgiving terrains. Across the ocean, a radically different theory proposed a European destiny for the lost tribes. British Israelism emerged in the 19th century with a breathtaking claim that the Anglo-Saxon and Celtic peoples of Britain were the direct biological descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. This was not a story of cultural preservation, but of a divine migration across continents, a grand hidden history where the British people were God's chosen, inheriting the biblical promises made to ancient Israel. The theory constructed an elaborate narrative to connect these distant dots. Proponents argued that after their Assyrian exile, the tribes did not remain in the east. Instead, they began a long northwestward migration, traveling through the Caucasus, where they picked up the name Caucasians, and eventually settling in the islands of Britain. They became the Saxons, a name supposedly derived from Isaac's sons, and the Celts, seen as the tribe of Judah. This was not merely a fringe religious idea, it was a powerful ideological force that wove itself into the fabric of British national identity. At the heart of this narrative was the British monarchy itself. British Israelists identified the British royal family as the literal continuation of the royal line of King David. This connection was famously, though falsely, linked to the Stone of Scone, the ancient coronation stone upon which British monarchs were crowned. Legend was spun that this stone was the very pillow Jacob used at Bethel, later taken by the prophet Jeremiah to Ireland and then to Scotland, a physical symbol of the transferred divine covenant. The theory gained immense traction during the peak of the British Empire. For a nation ruling over a vast global domain, the idea that this was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, that the British were a chosen people with a manifest destiny to rule, was profoundly appealing. It provided a theological justification for imperialism, framing the empire's expansion not as conquest, but as a divine right inherited from ancient Israel. Yet, by the mid-20th century, the theory was largely dismantled by scholars from every relevant field. Linguists pointed out that Hebrew and early Germanic languages share no such direct lineage. Historians found no archaeological or credible historical evidence for a mass migration of Israelites into the British Isles. Genetic studies later confirmed that the ancestry of the British people is overwhelmingly linked to prehistoric European migrations, not the Levant. British Israelism stands today as a fascinating historical artifact, a testament to how the mystery of the lost tribes could be reshaped to serve the national myths and imperial ambitions of a modern power. It shows us that the search for these tribes is not just about history, but about our own deep need for identity and purpose, a need so powerful it can rewrite the past. While some theories pointed east and others west, one of the most detailed and spiritually significant claims places the lost tribes directly in the Americas. Within the faith of the Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church, the story of these tribes is not a mystery but a matter of sacred scripture chronicled in the Book of Mormon. This text presents a grand narrative of ancient migration, beginning around 600 BCE, just before the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. A prophet named Lehi, a descendant of the Israelite patriarch Joseph, is warned by God to flee the doomed city with his family. They journey into the wilderness and are divinely guided to build a ship which carries them across the vast ocean to a promised land, the Americas. Upon arrival, this family group splits into two main factions, the Nephites and the Lamanites, whose epic cycles of righteousness, warfare, and apostasy form the core of the book's history. A central tenet of this belief is that these Israelite migrants were not just a small, isolated group. They grew into mighty civilizations, and their descendants, primarily through the Lamanite lineage, are understood to be among the principal ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. This connection is not a historical footnote, it is a foundational element of the faith's identity and its global missionary work, representing a literal fulfillment of the scriptural promise that the scattered children of Israel would be gathered from all corners of the earth. The Book of Mormon itself is presented as a religious record, a second testament of Jesus Christ, who, after his resurrection, is described as visiting these Israelite descendants in the New World. This narrative provides a sweeping theological answer to the question of the lost tribes, framing the entire American continent as a stage for a divine drama that runs parallel to the biblical narrative in the Old World. For believers, this is not a speculative theory but revealed truth, a cornerstone of their understanding of God's dealings with all humanity. Deep in southeastern Nigeria, the Igbo people carry a story of ancestral wandering that echoes across millennia. Among the many communities who see themselves in the lost tribes, the Igbo claim is one of the most profound, deeply woven into their cultural identity and recent history. Many Igbo traditionalists and scholars point to specific tribes of Israel as their forebears, with Gad, Zebulun, and Manasseh being the most frequently cited. This is not a casual comparison, but a belief supported by a tapestry of traditional practices that bear a striking resemblance to ancient Israelite laws. The practice of circumcision on the 8th day after birth is a powerful example mirroring the biblical covenant. Dietary customs also align with traditional Igbo practices forbidding the consumption of certain animals like the pig in a way that strongly recalls the kosher laws of the Torah. Beyond specific rituals, there exists a broader cultural framework, a powerful sense of being a distinct and chosen people with a unique destiny, a self-perception that resonates deeply with the biblical narrative of the Israelites. This deeply held belief was not merely a matter of historical curiosity. It became a potent force during one of the most traumatic periods in modern African history. During the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War, which raged from 1967 to 1970, the Igbo people sought to form the independent nation of Biafra. In this struggle for self-determination, their identification with the Israelites was powerfully reinforced. They saw themselves as a persecuted people, fighting for their survival against a powerful federal government, much like the ancient Israelites facing down the Pharaoh or the armies of Canaan. This narrative provided a profound spiritual and psychological framework for their resistance, framing their immense suffering not just as a political conflict, but as part of an ancient, almost biblical story of exile and the hope for a promised land. The connection even manifested in tangible symbols, with the flag of the short-lived Republic of Biafra featuring a rising sun, which some interpreted as a symbol of hope and divine favor reminiscent of the Star of David. Today, this identification continues to shape Igbo identity. In modern Nigeria, some Igbo have formally embraced Judaism, establishing synagogues and seeking to align their lives more closely with the traditions they believe are their birthright. For them, the story of the lost tribes is not a distant legend but a living truth, a key to understanding their own past and their place in the world. Their claim challenges us to see the diaspora of the 10 tribes not as a single event, but as a complex web of migrations and memories preserved in the most unexpected of places. This incredible spread of theories from Japan to Nigeria, from Afghanistan to America, forces a critical question. With so many claims, how can we possibly separate compelling cultural memory from wishful thinking? The answer may lie not in stories alone, but in the very building blocks of life itself. In the search for the lost tribes, stories and traditions can only take us so far. To find a more concrete trail, we must turn to the language of life itself, written in the code of our DNA. The field of genetic genealogy has opened a new window into our ancient past, offering tools that feel almost like time travel. Scientists use specific parts of our genetic code as historical markers. The Y chromosome, passed down virtually unchanged from father to son, can trace deep paternal lineages across thousands of years. Mitochondrial DNA, inherited only from our mothers, does the same for the maternal line. By analyzing these genetic signatures in modern populations and comparing them to each other, researchers can map ancient migration routes and uncover hidden connections between peoples separated by vast distances and centuries. This genetic archaeology has been applied to many of the communities we have discussed, with results that are often surprising and always complex. For the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, genetic studies revealed a fascinating story. Their Y chromosome lines showed a clear and strong Middle Eastern origin, supporting their narrative of ancient Israelite descent. Yet their mitochondrial DNA was overwhelmingly local, tracing back to African women. This paints a picture not of a single mass migration, but of Israelite men arriving and integrating into local communities, their paternal lineage and traditions becoming the core of a new ethno-religious identity that endured for millennia. The results for the Beta Israel of India told a similar, though distinct, tale. Their genetic profile shows a significant mixture, with clear Middle Eastern paternal roots intertwined with strong local maternal Indian ancestry. This suggests their founding group was likely very small, just as their origin story of 7 couples claims, and that they grew through conversion and intermarriage with their neighbors while fiercely maintaining their core Israelite identity. For other groups, the genetic picture is far less clear. Studies on the Pashtun people have found only a very small frequency of the genetic markers typically associated with the ancient Levant. The vast majority of their ancestry points to Central and South Asian origins. This does not completely rule out a small influx of Israelite exiles, but it strongly refutes the idea that the Pashtun are primarily descended from the lost tribes. Similarly, genetic evidence does not support a direct Israelite origin for the peoples of Britain or Japan, pointing instead to their well-documented local ancestral roots. So what does this all mean? Genetics is a powerful tool, but it is not a magic wand. It cannot tell us what people believed or how they identified themselves. It can only trace biological ancestry. A community can be genetically linked to its geographic neighbors while still preserving the cultural and religious legacy of a small group of founding ancestors. The DNA evidence confirms that the story of the diaspora is one of mixture and integration, not of pure, isolated tribes surviving unchanged. The lost tribes did not vanish, their bloodlines merged with the wider world. Their legacy was carried forward not solely by biology, but by the unbreakable power of an idea, an identity so resilient it could be passed down through countless generations, far from its original home. Language itself can become a time capsule, preserving faint whispers of the past. Beyond genetics and oral histories, another path in our search follows the trail of words, seeking echoes of ancient Hebrew in the tongues of peoples from the Afghan highlands to the Nigerian delta. This linguistic evidence is both a tantalizing clue and a field riddled with pitfalls. For instance, the Pashto language spoken by the Pashtun contains words that some researchers argue have Hebrew roots. The Pashtun word for a musical instrument, saz, is linked by some to the Hebrew shur, meaning song. The name of the Afridi tribe itself is often connected to Ephraim. Similarly, among the Igbo of Nigeria, certain words spark curiosity. The Igbo word for a leader or elder, Ez, bears a striking phonetic resemblance to Ezer, a Hebrew word for help or strength, often used in a royal context. Perhaps the most compelling linguistic case comes from the mountain Jews of the Caucasus. Their unique language, Juhuri, is a Persian base so deeply infused with ancient Hebrew and Aramaic that it stands as a living fossil. Their word for God is Hudoi, from the Persian Kuda, yet they use Hebrew words for nearly all religious and cultural concepts. This is not a list of a few similar words, but a deep structural borrowing that points to a community that maintained its sacred language even as it adopted a new vernacular for daily life. These linguistic connections feel like direct links to a lost world, yet the journey from a suggestive word to a proven historical connection is incredibly difficult. Languages are not static, they are rivers that constantly change course, fed by countless streams. A single word could have arrived not through a mass migration of a lost tribe, but through a lone Jewish trader traveling the Silk Road, his vocabulary seeping into the local dialect. Conquests redraw linguistic maps, imposing new words and erasing old ones. The natural evolution of language over 2,700 years can transform a word beyond all recognition, or create coincidental similarities between two completely unrelated tongues. How can we be sure that the Igbo Ez and the Hebrew Ezer are truly related, and not just a random sonic alignment, a trick of the ear and the immense span of time? Proving a definitive linguistic link over such a vast chasm of years often proves impossible, leaving us with a collection of fascinating but ultimately inconclusive hints. The words are there, whispering from the mountains and the markets, but their true story remains just out of reach, a puzzle where the pieces fit just well enough to keep us searching for more. The search for these lost tribes is far more than a historical puzzle. It is a story charged with cosmic significance, a mystery whose resolution is promised to herald the end of history itself. Across the three great Abrahamic faiths, the ultimate fate of the scattered tribes is not a question of where they went, but of when they will return. This is the domain of eschatology, the study of the final events, and the lost tribes are central characters in this divine drama. In the Jewish tradition, the prophets spoke with a unified voice about a future redemption. The book of Ezekiel provides one of the most powerful and detailed visions. He prophesies of a time when God will gather the children of Israel from the nations, bringing them back from their long exile. He even describes a symbolic act, taking two sticks and joining them together. One stick represents Judah, the southern kingdom, and the other represents Joseph, the northern kingdom of the lost tribes. The joining of the sticks signifies that they will be one nation again in their own land, never to be divided. This is not merely a political reunification, it is a spiritual resurrection of an entire people. The prophet Jeremiah echoes this promise, declaring that a time will come when it will no longer be said, "As the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites out of Egypt," but rather, "As the Lord lives, who brought the Israelites from the land of the north and from all the lands to which he had banished them." The return of the lost tribes would be a second Exodus, an event so monumental it would eclipse the memory of their original deliverance from Pharaoh. For many streams of Christian theology, this ingathering is intimately linked to the second coming of Jesus Christ. The belief is that before the Messiah can return, the full number of Israel must be present, a fulfillment of God's covenant with all 12 tribes. The physical return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel in modern times is often viewed by evangelical Christians as the first step in this prophetic timeline, setting the stage for the subsequent discovery and return of the lost tribes, which will then lead to a national acceptance of Jesus as the Messiah. Islamic eschatology, while different in its details, also holds a place for the people of Israel in the end times. Certain hadiths or traditions of the Prophet Muhammad speak of the Israelites being gathered before the Day of Judgment, and some interpretations identify specific tribes playing a role in the final battles against the false Messiah, known as the Dajjal. In all these traditions, the lost tribes are not forgotten relics. They are a sleeping giant, a dormant force whose awakening will signal a fundamental shift in the world order. Their discovery is not an end in itself, but a key that unlocks the next chapter of human destiny, promising an era of universal peace and divine justice. This profound hope transforms every potential discovery, from the Beta Israel to the Beni Manash, from a simple historical identification into a potential sign of the Messianic age. Are we merely uncovering the past, or are we, piece by piece, assembling the future? But this sprawling web of claims faces a formidable historical challenge, one that questions the very origins of an entire branch of the Jewish people. This is the Khazar hypothesis, a counter-narrative that rewrites the map of Jewish diaspora. The story begins not in the ancient Levant, but in the vast steppes of Central Asia between the Black and Caspian Seas. Here, between the 8th and 9th centuries, the Khazar Khaganate rose to power. This was a formidable empire of Turkic nomads, a major commercial and military power that held a strategic position along the Silk Road. Caught between the expanding spheres of influence of the Christian Byzantine Empire and the Muslim Caliphate, the Khazar leadership made a stunning decision. According to historical accounts, including correspondence between a Khazar king and a Spanish Jewish scholar, the Khazar court converted to Judaism. The theory suggests this was not a minor affair, but a mass conversion that established Judaism as the state religion of this powerful steppe empire. This historical pivot forms the core of a radical idea. In the 20th century, some historians proposed that after the Khaganate's eventual collapse, these Jewish Khazars did not simply vanish. Instead, they migrated westward into Eastern Europe. There, the theory claims, they became the foundational population for what would later be known as the Ashkenazi Jews. If this is true, it would mean that millions of Ashkenazi Jews are not primarily descended from the ancient Israelites of Judea, but from Turkic converts from the Caucasus. The implications for our search are profound. It would challenge the genetic and historical basis for many lost tribe claims, suggesting that the widespread diaspora of Jewish communities across Europe and Asia could be explained by a much later and entirely different migration. It reframes the question from where did the tribes go to who precisely inherited their legacy. For those who champion this view, the evidence seems compelling. They point to the historical records of the Khazar conversion and the known trade routes that connected the Khaganate to Europe. They argue that the unique Yiddish language contains traces of Turkic and Slavic influences that support a Khazar origin rather than a purely Germanic one. The theory presents a clean, alternate history, one where a people found their Jewish identity through choice and circumstance on the Eurasian steppe, not through an unbroken bloodline stretching back to Abraham. Yet the Khazar hypothesis is itself one of the most hotly contested ideas in all of Jewish history. Mainstream scholarship has largely rejected it. Critics point out that the historical evidence for a mass migration is thin to non-existent. More importantly, genetic studies have delivered a powerful rebuttal. Extensive research on Ashkenazi DNA reveals a genetic profile that is overwhelmingly Middle Eastern, not Central Asian. The studies show that Ashkenazi lineages, both paternal and maternal, can be traced back to a small founding population from the Levant that settled in southern Europe and then migrated east, mixing only minimally with local European populations. The genetic signature of the Khazars is simply not there in any significant measure. So, the Khazar hypothesis stands as a powerful cautionary tale. It reminds us that history is a complex tapestry, and that simple, elegant theories can be undone by the hard data written in our genes. It forces us to ask not just where a people went, but how a people came to be, and to recognize that the story of Israel is one of both unbroken lineage and of others who, throughout history, have chosen to join its journey. The search for identity is no longer confined to dusty scrolls or ancient legends. It has entered the modern era of geopolitics and immigration law, transforming ancient mysteries into urgent questions of citizenship and belonging. At the heart of this contemporary drama is the State of Israel's Law of Return, a foundational piece of legislation that grants every Jew the right to immigrate and receive citizenship. But what defines a Jew for the purpose of this law? The answer is anything but simple, creating a complex intersection of religious authority, historical claims, and national identity. For groups like the Bini Manash in northeast India, this legal framework became the gateway to a promised return. After generations of preserving traditions they believed linked them to the tribe of Manasseh, their formal recognition and conversion under the guidance of Israeli rabbinical authorities allowed thousands to make Aliyah to ascend to Israel. Their journey from remote villages to the modern Jewish state is a powerful, living testament to the enduring pull of a 3,000-year-old heritage. Yet their path also highlights the delicate balance Israel must strike. The law of return relies on a definition of Jewishness that is primarily based on Orthodox Jewish law, or halakha, which traditionally recognizes someone as Jewish either by having a Jewish mother or through a formal conversion. For communities with disputed or distant historical claims, this presents a formidable hurdle. A person might feel in their soul that they are a descendant of a lost tribe, but without the rigorous documentation or the endorsement of the chief rabbinate, that deeply felt identity may not be enough to legally qualify for automatic citizenship. This creates a profound tension between the romantic, national narrative of the lost tribes returning and the strict, legalistic requirements of religious law. How does a nation reconcile its prophetic destiny to gather its exiles with the practical and political realities of verifying those exiles? The story of these communities is no longer just about where they came from, but about whether they can officially come home, a process that tests the very boundaries of history, faith, and the meaning of return itself. Yet for all the extraordinary claims spanning the globe, the most likely answer is perhaps the most ordinary. The dominant view among historians and archaeologists is that the 10 tribes were never lost in a physical sense. They simply ceased to be Israelite. The process was not a mysterious disappearance, but a slow, grinding absorption into the vast cultural mosaic of the ancient Near East. Imagine a cup of salt poured into a bucket of water. The salt is still there, but it has dissolved, becoming inseparable from the whole. This was the fate of the exiles. The Assyrian policy of mass deportation was specifically designed to achieve this. By scattering a rebellious population across their empire and resettling other conquered peoples in the Israelites' former lands, they broke the bonds of community, language, and shared tradition that hold a culture together. A family from the tribe of Ephraim might find itself in a village in northern Mesopotamia, surrounded by people speaking Aramaic and worshipping different gods. To survive, they would have to adapt. They would learn the local language for trade, adopt local customs to fit in, and likely intermarry with their new neighbors within a generation or two. Their children would be bilingual, their grandchildren might only speak Aramaic, and their great-grandchildren would know the stories of their Israelite ancestors as little more than faint family legends, if they remembered them at all. Their distinct identity, once defined by their covenant, their land, and their temple, simply faded away over time. They did not vanish from the earth. They became Assyrians, they became Babylonians. Their descendants through countless generations are almost certainly among the diverse populations of modern-day Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Turkey. They are the ancestors of many, not the property of one. This theory of total assimilation asks us to let go of the romantic quest for a hidden kingdom and accept a more profound, if quieter, truth. The legacy of the lost tribes is not a specific people in a remote location, but a contribution to the rich, complex, and interconnected tapestry of humanity itself. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the lost tribes is not a physical one, but a symbolic one woven into the very fabric of Western thought. Beyond the historical debate lies a profound interpretation where these tribes are less a vanished people and more a powerful, evolving symbol. They embody the universal human experience of exile, the pain of being scattered, and the eternal hope for homecoming. In the Jewish prophetic tradition, the lost northern kingdom served as a stark national cautionary tale. Their exile was the direct consequence of abandoning their covenant, a divine punishment for idolatry and social injustice. Yet this was never the end of the story. The prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel transformed this tragedy into a wellspring of hope. The image of the lost tribes scattered to the four winds became the foundation for a promise, the assurance that no matter how far they had fallen, God would one day gather them from every corner of the earth. This was not just a political restoration, but a spiritual healing for the entire nation, a mending of the ancient schism between North and South. Christianity inherited and reinterpreted this powerful motif. For the early church, the lost tribes came to represent the entire Gentile world, the scattered children of God who would be brought into a new covenant through Jesus Christ. The idea of a people once lost but now found resonated deeply with the core message of redemption, becoming a metaphor for spiritual awakening and the universal call to salvation. Even in a secular context, the symbol retains its power. The phrase "lost tribes" can evoke any diaspora, any community severed from its roots, clinging to an identity against the tides of assimilation. It speaks to our deepest anxieties about belonging and our longing for a place where we are fully known. The mystery endures not because we lack answers, but because the question itself is fundamental. Are we, in our own ways, all a little lost, searching for a connection to something greater, and holding on to the hope that we, too, will one day be found? This symbolic journey reminds us that some stories are too powerful to be confined to history books. They become myths that shape our understanding of the world and of ourselves. The story of a vanished people is written not only in ancient texts but also in stone and clay. Assyrian royal inscriptions provide our most direct and chilling testimony of the conquest. Carved into palace walls and on monumental prisms, these records boast of the empire's might, and the fall of Samaria is a centerpiece of this propaganda. A prism from the reign of Sargon II states it with cold finality. He claims to have besieged and conquered the city of Samaria, and to have carried away 27,290 of its people as captives. He lists the vast plunder he took and concludes by stating that he rebuilt the city, making it greater than before, and settled people from other conquered lands within it. This is not a hidden history, it is a victory cry chiseled in stone for eternity, confirming the biblical account of a mass deportation designed to shatter a nation's spirit. But what became of those 27,000 people? The trail does not end at the deportation order. Other Assyrian administrative records, like ration lists found at the royal court in Nimrud, mention Israelites by name, listing them among other deportees receiving food allowances. One such list includes several individuals with names containing the divine element, Yah, a clear reference to the Hebrew name for God, Yahweh. These are not just numbers, they are people, their identities preserved on a crumbling clay tablet, evidence of their forced integration into the lowest rungs of Assyrian society. They were given new identities not as a free people, but as dependents of the state that had conquered them. Archaeologists have also uncovered more personal remnants of this exile. At sites like Tel Hadid in Israel, a clay seal impression was found bearing the name Achiyahu, a Hebrew name meaning brother of Yahweh. Intriguingly, a seal with an almost identical name, Achiyahu, son of Menham, was discovered hundreds of miles away at the Assyrian site of Nineveh. While we cannot be certain it belonged to the same person, the coincidence is staggering. It suggests the journey of a Sumerian noble, his personal seal carried from his homeland to the very heart of the empire that destroyed it, a small, silent artifact speaking volumes about displacement and survival. Further east, in what is now Iran, evidence emerges of Israelites living in their new lands. At a site believed to be the Assyrian provincial capital of Gozan, archaeologists unearthed a fragment of a pottery bowl. Scratched into its surface before it was fired was a Hebrew inscription that reads, "For the wine of the Omer." The Omer was a specific Israelite grain offering, a term with no meaning in Assyrian religion. This was not a piece of looted treasure, but a functional object made locally for an Israelite household. Someone in exile was still observing the intricate details of their ancestral faith, using a bowl made for a ritual that connected them to a home they would never see again. Yet we must be careful not to let hope color our interpretation. A single bowl does not prove a thriving, distinct Israelite community persisted for centuries. It is a snapshot, a moment of resilience in what was likely a long, slow process of cultural fading. The archaeological record shows us the beginning of the exile with stark clarity in the Assyrian annals, and it shows us flickers of Israelite life in foreign land. But it does not show us a people marching in a unified mass to a new promised land. It shows us individuals and families doing what they must to endure, their identities gradually dissolving into the immense cultural sea of the ancient world, leaving behind only these poignant, fragmented echoes. The voices of the prophets cut through the chaos of conquest and exile, offering a divine perspective on the northern kingdom's staggering fate. While kings planned battles and empires drew new maps, figures like Isaiah and Jeremiah delivered messages that were both terrifying and hopeful, framing the tribe's disappearance not as a random tragedy, but as a pivotal moment in a larger story. Their words provide the theological lens through which this historical catastrophe was understood, transforming a national defeat into a narrative of judgment and, ultimately, redemption. Isaiah, active even before the Assyrian onslaught, spoke with fiery clarity about the causes of the coming disaster. He condemned the northern kingdom's social injustice and its turn to foreign gods, warning that their moral decay would inevitably lead to their collapse. Yet his prophecy did not end with judgment. He is perhaps most famous for his breathtaking visions of a future reconciliation. He spoke of a voice crying in the wilderness, preparing the way for a highway, a literal and spiritual path for the exiles to return. He envisioned a time when the wolf would live with the lamb, a metaphor for the end of the ancient hostility between the northern and southern kingdoms. For Isaiah, the scattered tribes were not forgotten. They were in God's hand, and their eventual return would be so miraculous it would eclipse the original exodus from Egypt. His poetry painted a picture of a second chance, a restoration that would heal the ancient schism that had torn the nation in two. Jeremiah, witnessing the final death throes of the southern kingdom of Judah, carried this torch of hope into a darker hour. He addressed the exiles directly, telling them to build houses, plant gardens, and seek the peace of the cities to which they had been deported. This was a radical command to find a way to live in the very place of their captivity. But he coupled this practical advice with an even more audacious promise. He declared that the time was coming when people would no longer swear by the God who brought Israel out of Egypt, but by the God who brought the offspring of Israel from the land of the north and from all the countries where he had driven them. This was a prophecy that redefined history itself, making the future return of the lost tribes a greater act of salvation than the founding of the nation. How would his original audience, the people of Judah facing their own exile, have heard these words? They would have been a lifeline, a promise that their God's power was not limited to the land of Israel, and that their northern brethren, though seemingly gone, were still part of a divine plan. The prophets transformed the lost tribes from a political and demographic mystery into a central article of faith. Their disappearance was a temporary state, a period of divine discipline that would one day give way to an unimaginable homecoming. This belief, seeded by the prophets, is what fueled the hope that kept the search alive for millennia. It is the reason why every potential discovery of a lost community is met not just with historical curiosity, but with a sense of awe, as if a 5,000-year-old promise might finally be coming true. This incredible spread of potential connections reveals something deeper than just historical curiosity. When cultures from the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of Japan claim a link to these ancient Israelites, we are witnessing a fundamental human impulse, a powerful need to find a place within a story that has captivated the world for millennia. Why does this specific narrative hold such universal appeal? At its heart, the story of the lost tribes is a grand epic of exile and the hope of return, a theme that resonates with almost every culture on earth. For a people facing displacement, persecution, or the simple erosion of their identity, seeing their own struggle reflected in this ancient biblical drama provides a profound sense of meaning. It transforms local hardship from a random historical event into a chapter in a sacred, global story of divine testing and ultimate redemption. This connection offers a kind of spiritual prestige, linking one's own community to the foundational text of Western civilization. To claim descent from the lost tribes is to claim a heritage that is both ancient and honored, a lineage that carries weight in the eyes of the world. It is a search for roots that are not just old but prophetically significant. There is also the powerful psychological comfort of not being alone. The idea that your people, no matter how isolated they seem, are actually part of a vast, scattered family waiting to be reunited is a profoundly hopeful one. It suggests that your current state is not permanent, that a homecoming is always possible, and that you belong to something far greater than yourself. This is why the mystery endures with such vitality. It is not merely a puzzle to be solved by archaeologists, but a living, breathing story that communities use to understand their own past and imagine their future. The lost tribes have become a mirror, reflecting our own deepest yearnings for identity, for purpose, and for a promised land, wherever that may be. The evidence we have gathered does not point to a single destination, but to 1,000 different possibilities. Genetics tells a story of gradual blending, where Israelite ancestry merged with local populations across Ethiopia, India, and the Caucasus. Yet history and tradition shout back, insisting that a distinct identity was preserved against all odds. Linguistics offers us tantalizing whispers, words that sound like ancient Hebrew echoing in the highlands of Afghanistan and the villages of Nigeria. But are these echoes proof of a mass migration, or merely the cultural footprints of a few travelers, their words adopted and transformed over centuries? Religion presents the most powerful narrative of all, a divine promise that these tribes were not destroyed, only scattered, awaiting a final, miraculous return. Each field of inquiry gives us a different piece of the puzzle, and they stubbornly refuse to fit neatly together. If the 10 tribes were simply absorbed into the Assyrian Empire, vanishing without a trace, then why does the memory of their exile burn so brightly in the hearts of so many diverse peoples thousands of years later? Why would communities from the other side of the world cling to rituals and origin stories that point back to a small kingdom in the ancient Levant? Conversely, if they undertook epic journeys to Japan or the Americas, where is the definitive archaeological proof, the unbroken trail of artifacts that leads us from the ruins of Samaria to these distant shores? The lack of a single, clean answer is what keeps this mystery breathing. It forces us to confront the very nature of identity itself. Is it written in our genes, carried in our stories, or found in the faith we choose to uphold? The enduring search for the lost tribes of Israel is far more than a historical detective story. It is a testament to the unyielding power of a single, captivating narrative to transcend time, to offer a sense of origin and belonging, and to remind us that some stories are too meaningful to ever be completely solved. We have walked a path that stretches from the ancient ruins of Samaria to the highlands of Ethiopia, from the bustling markets of India to the remote villages of the Caucasus. We have listened to the legends of warrior clans in Afghanistan and the sacred rituals of priests in Japan, each one a thread in this vast, intricate tapestry. The story of the lost tribes of Israel is ultimately more than a historical detective story. It is a profound exploration of identity itself, a narrative about the unbreakable bonds of faith and the deep, human longing to belong to something greater than ourselves. It asks us what it means to be part of a people and how that identity can be carried across oceans and millennia, not just in blood but in story and spirit. The journey does not end here. The mystery is now yours to ponder. What do you think happened to these vanished people? Share your own theories in the comments below. And if you were captivated by this ancient mystery, subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten corners of history.